Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crowley back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning about two-point perspective. You can see I've drawn a kind of futuristic rocket ship here. It's going to be coming in for a landing on a sort of Death Star-like surface down here. But before we get to that, I want to do a quick overview of two-point perspective for those of you who have never studied it. Here, this horizontal line here we call the horizon line. We put 2 points as vanishing points, and the vertical lines are all pretty much perfectly straight up and down. It's these edges here that are going back towards the vanishing point, and by having those dots there and always using the ruler, you can make sure that you get these lines in the right place and have a pretty convincing looking cube there that follows the rules of perspective. Now, beginners can often make the mistake of getting the 2 points, the 2 vanishing points, too close together, and what happens with that is you end up with this very distorted lower edge. Even though it's following the rules of perspective, it gets a kind of a fisheye look, and so those of you who have been having trouble with two-point perspective, that might be the issue. Remember to get the 2 points as far apart as possible. Generally speaking, on a normal-sized piece of paper, you will never have the points too far away from each other, only too close together. So you can see I've put them here at the very far edges of this horizon line, and I'm going to begin by building a sort of rectangular base that I can build this landing pad on. I'm going to go ahead and do that in time-lapse, but then come back to explain how I did it. Okay, so you can see I've got the basic shape of this standing rectangle here. I'm erasing away the horizon line that goes behind it, leaving just hopefully the main lines of the structure. And you know, I think this is pretty straightforward. Even a beginner should be able to draw a standing rectangular box like this. And what we're going to do next is probably no more difficult, I don't think, really. It's going to be building a sort of more horizontal rectangular shape that goes on top of this structure. But notice again that all of the lines, apart from the vertical ones, will be relating to these 2 vanishing points. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so again we've got the proper lines in place to define this structure. I had this idea of a slightly deliberately off-center sci-fi looking structure. So if you look at this and say, well, shouldn't this be more in the middle? Well, on purpose, I'm kind of making it a little asymmetrical, sort of just for the fun of it. Now, once we've got that in place, we're pretty much done with the basics of this structure. I'm going to be adding a lot of detail later on, but I want to show you how you can define pretty quickly and easily the surface of this, as I said, Death Star-like space station by drawing lots and lots of these lines that are going across to that vanishing point. You may have a couple of lines that go behind the structure, taking care not to have them continue through there. Get a few lines back there, and that helps to make this more solid looking. And then go ahead and kind of crisscross over each line by making more of these lines that go back to that vanishing point. And, you know, it's funny how quickly this starts to define this surface, and we start to kind of believe it as a Death Star-like world. It's, to my mind, really not that difficult to pull off, so long as, like I said at the beginning of the video, so long as you don't get those 2 dots too close to each other. Now, what I want to do is to make this drawing a little more interesting by adding a structure that's over here in the foreground. And again, it'll follow the same rules of perspective, although I'm going to get a little bit of a diagonal surface in here. Let's go ahead and do it in time-lapse, and I'll explain how I did it. All right, so I built a sort of a structure here in the foreground. Not exactly sure what it is. Maybe it's an intergalactic swimming pool. It's got sort of that shape as I look at it, these sort of edges that come in here. And what I want to point out to you is that, again, I've got all of these lines that are relating to the vanishing points, but I've decided this time to add a sort of diagonal surface right here. You know, if this is our swimming pool, maybe this is the wading area where the Death Star children can wade into the pool. But these lines do not relate to either of those lines. They are just sort of surface lines that help define this diagonal edge. Part of the reason that I chose to do a sort of Death Star-like surface is it's just all straight lines. And when you're learning two-point perspective, it can be helpful if you have a surface that's composed entirely of straight lines, and then you don't have to worry about too many unusual things that are not relating to your 2 points. But in this case, you can see just this one diagonal surface, which sort of adds a little interest to things visually, I think, is indeed composed of lines that do not relate. But just to make it kind of interesting, I am continuing those lines across this upper edge of our intergalactic swimming pool. And by doing that, these are just little tricks to give solidity. Is that a word? Solidness, solidification to the surface of our swimming pool-like structure. And this one, actually, come to think of it, is also a little bit diagonal. It's not straight up and down. I remember I used to look at drawings in books by the guy, I think his name is Ralph McQuarrie, who did all those designs for the Death Star. And I used to look at those things and think, man, how did he do it, man? That stuff looks so real. And I'm still a little bit kind of blown away by how he did it. But now that I understand the rules of perspective, it seems more within my grasp that I could make a drawing like that myself. Until you learn these perspective rules, it does seem like a mystery. Man, how can people draw these structures that look so solid and real? So anyway, we've got a little bit of that foreground thing. What I'm going to do now is add just a little bit of extra detail to this. You know, it looks like a weird tabletop kind of a thing. I want to transform this into more of a landing pad structure by adding a few more extra lines to it. Again, all in time-lapse, but I'll come back to explain what I did. Alright, so you can see how I've added a sort of second box built on top of that first box here at the base. Just sort of giving a little more variety to the contour. Like I said, when I started out, this sort of just looked like a weird table or something like that. And by adding these extra structures and lines, you can kind of take it past that kind of a look to something a little more sci-fi looking. Notice that I added an extra structure here that breaks that sort of upper line. I mean, the key thing for you to remember is you start first with that basic structure, and then you build all this detail on top of it. If you try to start with the detail, I don't know, I guess some people are capable of doing that. I certainly am not. I need that basic, you know, boxy kind of structure underneath it, and then I know where to put all these details. I'm going to add one last thing here, and that is some distance structures way off at the edge of the horizon line. And notice again that I will make at least some of them obey that rule of perspective, following back toward those vanishing points. So yeah, I think as you get a little further away here, it maybe gets harder to see exactly what I'm doing. But you get the idea that pretty much every part of your illustration in a drawing like this, and this is, you know, pretty much unique to a Death Star type surface where every single line is straight. All of these lines are pretty much relating to those vanishing points, obeying the same laws of perspective, so that the whole illustration hangs together and becomes recognizably part of the same world. Now, I'm going to go ahead and switch to inking this illustration. I'm going to be using a black, not Prismacolor. That's not a Prismacolor. That is an inking pen, Krilly. How is that for the voice of my angry viewers? I keep coming up with new voices for my viewers. I'll turn you all into thugs now. Quilly, hey, Quilly, that is not a Prismacolor. Don't make me send my boys after you. Anyway, this is definitely a Micron Pigma, really great art pen that you can find at pretty much any decent art supply store. I'm going to go ahead and use this for inking up the lines and come back. I'll do that all in time-lapse. Come back to explain the choices that I made. Alright, so you can see I finished up the inking and then pulled out the pencil to add some shading here just to give the objects a little more form. But I came up with an idea while I was doing this. I thought, hey, why not, instead of coloring this now, turn this into a two-parter, add coloring in a second video. That way I can take my time and do a lot of real-time coloring and less time-lapse, because you know how some of my viewers feel about time-lapse. They either say it like this: I detest time-lapse, or else they're like, dude, man, time-lapse is heinous. You got to just knock it off, man. I have warring camps now on which voice, and after this video, they'll probably be saying, do the gangster voice, man. But hey, Quilly, enough with the time-lapse, huh? What, you think you're a wise guy? You think it's amusing? Anyway, it's clearly time for me to lay the pencil down once I start getting into silly voice territory. But I do want to thank anyone who has picked up my graphic novel series, Meeky Falls. So appreciative of your support. Those of you who've got Brody's Ghost, hearing from more and more are seeing this at their school book fairs, courtesy of Scholastic. Thank you so much for your support, for subscribing, for linking to the videos on Facebook and so forth. I really do greatly appreciate your support, but let's wrap this one up. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back with another one real soon.